Hey everyone, Pugs here with 2 new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering the last trio of Season 5, for real this time, Picture Day, Pat No Pay, and BlackJack. Yes, it is intensely embarrassing that I keep getting the number of trios in Season 5 wrong, but this is the last one for realsies. I triple checked. Anyway, these 3 episodes are also very Season 5-esque. Nothing else I can really say in that regard. Also, isn't it interesting how so many of these trios have a Patrick-focused 4-minute episode? I just noticed that. Huh. Neat. Okay, well, as always, thank you to everyone tuning into today's video and anyone who has been tuning into the channel in general. And now, let's just get right into it. Starting us off on this fine day is Picture Day, an episode that brings to mind my primary education days of yore. And this is an episode that can perhaps be considered the pinnacle of forgotten episodes, or maybe not the peak, since it does have some stiff competition in that respect. But either way, Picture Day is a great example of a forgotten episode. The only reason I remember this episode, other than rewatching it for the purposes of reviewing it, is because of a game I used to play on Nick.com, Picture Day Disaster. That was a fun game, by the way. But yeah, I feel like this episode is very forgotten about, which is a shame because y'all know I don't like when any episode is forgotten. Yes, this includes the really bad ones too, but this episode isn't one of those, so that point is irrelevant for now. Picture Day heralds the return of a line that I haven't really been seeing too much during this season, which is the SpongeBob being a child versus adult line, and that this season hasn't demonstrated the straddling of this line isn't necessarily a bad thing, since it has been leaning towards the side I prefer anyway, which is SpongeBob being an adult. So anyway, this episode is all about him wanting to look his best for Picture Day at boating school, a wonderful mix of childhood and adulthood activities. As for the beginning scene of this episode, I enjoyed all of the cool visual gags that we see while SpongeBob gets ready, such as him painting on his sock stripes and his pants. Honestly, SpongeBob was rocking those locks. Or maybe they were twists? I don't know. He made them work, that's what I'm trying to say. And then we get introduced to the basic structure of this episode pretty quickly, as SpongeBob starts to go through a series of unfortunate, perfect-looked ruining events, each more absurd than the last. The part with the teenagers was hilarious, and I kind of love how teenagers were portrayed in this episode. Not because it's realistic, because it's not, but I did think it was funny, even if it was almost boomer humor. It's also quite dramatic. Like, I love the way Harold is like, "Save yourself, I'm finished," all while he's looking like he's bleeding out on the floor. And of course, it's always, well, not always, but in this case, funny to see SpongeBob go through so much effort to avoid the teenagers' ketchup, just to get ketchup squirted on him by an old guy with no aim. SpongeBob's blank, defeated look and the reaction is the glue making this scene so funny. The next time SpongeBob goes out, he plans ahead by wearing sponge gloss, and during this next attempt, I love how he acts like this is some kind of spy movie hiding everywhere in a way that calls back to I Had an Accident. Of course, his careful movements fail spectacularly when his sponge gloss causes an accident, which then covers him in stamps, oatmeal, and glue, which I find hilarious. Patrick then shows up out of nowhere, along with that, we get another use of that rare track from Atlantis Square Happy Bells, which is this OST's only other use in the show, so that's fun. Of course, Patrick is not exactly here to be helpful, as he throws SpongeBob on a taco for reasons of random comedy. This ended up being funnier than I expected, though. Poor SpongeBob ends up breaking down after this, and all I've got to say is that this episode makes even more sense when you view it from the lens of SpongeBob being autistic. Like, are y'all picking up what I'm laying down here? I love the whole part where SpongeBob finally gets his photo taken because the photographer is so over the bullshit. And also, the photographer cleans SpongeBob up, and so it seems like he's ready to go. But then he gives SpongeBob the ugliest fit known to man, and SpongeBob keeps crying, which was justified because what even was that fit? And then when the photographer brings out the pearly whites, I thought it was funny because they round out the awfulness of SpongeBob's look here. SpongeBob definitely has quite the look for his photo, that's for sure, and I thought the ending of this episode was cute, as well as very satisfying after all the trials and tribulations SpongeBob was put through. Mans knows how to show out for the camera. He sure does. Picture Day was a nice episode. There's nothing really all that special about it, and there's also isn't much super funny in it either, but I still find this episode to be decently enjoyable. Or perhaps a little more than that, because I don't think this one fits in my okay tier at all. Nah, I'm putting this one in good, where it comes in with a score of 7.2 out of 10. Coming up next is Pat No Pay, which not only do I frequently forget is a 4-minute episode, but also an episode that I frequently mix up with No Hat for Pat, and that's because these episodes have a few similarities. Pat No Pay is probably better than No Hat for Pat, though. That's not a solid opinion though, because obviously I haven't gotten to know Hat for Pat yet, and at the moment I can't quite remember my feelings on that episode, but I've got an idea. Also, before I get into things, but fun little fact, this episode uses Hawaiian Train as its title card music, aka the track that was used for the title card of Help Wanted, so that's fun. Okay, time to review the last 4-minute episode in the show. I'm pretty sure I've said this before, but I love how the business of the Krusty Krab fluctuates depending on the episode. In some episodes, the place is packed to the brim, but in others, it's absolutely deserted. Consistency is a suggestion when it comes to this show, and I love that. They do everything for the bit, and there's nothing I can do but respect that. This beginning setup part of the episode with Patrick coming in struggling with Krabby Patty withdrawals is entertaining enough, although I question Mr. Krabs' logic in letting him eat the patties before paying. Maybe he thought Patrick would be more likely to spend more this way, I don't know. I can't even imagine eating the sheer amount of patties Patrick does. That's a one-way ticket to heart failure, or at least my stomach bursting. And also, I like the way that Patrick interpreted paying, because he wasn't prepared to fork over any cash, that's for sure. And I love how the Krusty Krab immediately goes on lockdown once that little fact is revealed, because it's funny, and also it implies that there's a whole process for when customers don't pay, and that is so very in character for Mr. Krabs. I also like how even though consistency is a suggestion in this show, we actually see the Krusty Krab locked down throughout the rest of the episode. As the rest of Pat No Pay plays out, I'm reminded a lot of Big Pink Loser, as Patrick keeps messing up at every job he's given because of his short attention span and complete foolishness. Honestly, the creativity of his idiocy is rather entertaining, like Patrick eating the hand soap in the bathroom or smashing the freezer into a barrel when he was asked to put ice cubes in the barrel. Mr. Krabs' muttering and grumbling really helps these scenes too. And as for the last task, shredding the trash using a machine we'll never see again, because, as is a theme for this episode, consistency is a suggestion, Patrick actually does this well. That is, until SpongeBob is told to take a bag of money to the safe, and yes, again, consistency is a suggestion because is the safe not right behind Mr. Krabs when he gives SpongeBob the money? I love when the show just does not care like this. It's so funny. Anyway, when SpongeBob gets that bag of money, it's pretty obvious where this episode's gonna go, and while it is predictable, the ensuing brief bit of chaos that is Patrick throwing the money in the trash compactor is funny enough. This is especially true once we get my favorite gag of things randomly exploding, and all the money shreds in Mr. Krabs' face. There isn't too much else to say about Pat No Pay. It's a solid episode, and I like the way Patrick's fails and transgressions get worse. I just think the progression is well done in this episode. And while this episode is short, meaning that it only has a few main gags and segments, it is definitely nowhere near a bad episode. It may not be particularly funny, but it is very amusing, and it has enough funny moments to allow this episode to cruise right into my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8.4 out of 10. I also think this episode lends more support to my thesis of sorts that Patrick can only lead an episode if he's got a very solid supporting cast to bounce off of, and Mr. Krabs fills this role quite nicely. The last episode of the 93 trio is BlackJack. Maybe it says something about me that the first thing I thought of when seeing this title was the card game. Between this and my love of playing and watching poker, I'm sure it looks real bad for me right now. I promise I don't gamble. Not that there's anything wrong with gambling and wanting to add some risk to your life. Anyway, back to discussing the topic at hand, BlackJack is an episode that I've always had a soft spot for. Well, maybe I shouldn't use that phrasing. That implies the episode is bad, but I like it anyway. Listen, I don't know how to say it. I've always just had this unexplainable draw to this episode. I don't really know why, that's just how it's always been for me. I've always really loved the atmosphere of this episode. The whole mystery aspect that shifts over to a thriller kind of feel, although all of this is of course tinged with varying levels of comedy. I also just thought the writing of this episode was pretty clean, or tight. I feel like the words I usually use don't get the message across, but I don't know how to fix that. Let me give an example. Let's take the beginning scene of this episode. Gary is the one to grab the letter, which of course covers it in slime, which then causes SpongeBob to not see the return address of the letter, and if he had, that may have at least helped to settle the episode's main conflict. It's just good writing. I also really like that this episode shines some light on the SquarePants family. This is the first episode to really do that, and coincidentally, we get a second one this season with Stanley as SquarePants, although I'll say between the episodes, one does this a lot better than the other. And continuing this discussion of the beginning part of BlackJack, I liked how the letter looked like every cliche ransom note ever with the words cut out from magazines. I also think it's funny that SpongeBob had a cousin that went to prison. Okay, I'm back on this again, but I really have to say that I really love that we learn more about SpongeBob's family in this episode. One thing about this show especially is that we don't really know much about the characters' families, which is kind of weird for a sitcom, since sitcoms are so frequently centered around a family. Unless it's one of those sitcoms about friends in their 20s, which I guess SpongeBob SquarePants is more like. And I suppose in a way, perhaps SpongeBob's friends are his family, his chosen family, his found family? I'm mostly joking about that, don't take me serious. Anyway, back to the episode because I can't seem to stay on topic. When BlackJack appeared for the first time, my first thought was Bender? Yes, this is me revealing that I have in fact seen at least a few episodes of Futurama. But nah, really, I mostly recognize John DiMaggio's voice as Jake the dog, but BlackJack sounds more like Bender, and as such, he was my first thought. Okay, I promise I'll actually spend time reviewing the episode now. So, SpongeBob's little kid design is absolutely adorable, and the flashback makes me laugh, which is probably a bad thing to say because Lil SB gets beat up, but sorry, it's hilarious. And then, of course, I have to say I love how SpongeBob immediately was like, I gotta help my parents, even though he's scared shitless. Like, I love his good heart. I also think it's funny how serious he's taking the situation. Once SpongeBob arrives at his parents' house, that mystery element I mentioned early on starts moving full steam ahead. And I love that. Upon seeing the house covered in plastic film and a shattered picture on the floor, SpongeBob jumps to quite a few far-fetched conclusions. Like, why would BlackJack attack his aunt and uncle? I suppose BlackJack doesn't help his case by leaving these ransom-looking letters. When SpongeBob thinks the cookie is his grandma, I'm dying laughing. This episode really comes through with the dramatics. I love it. And SpongeBob himself is really coming through with the hilarious reactions as well. It's all really just so great. And then I really liked the whole bit with Uncle Captain Blue, and this scene is an excellent example of a misunderstanding joke that I actually like, since frequently those can become frustrating real fast. Poor SpongeBob inadvertently volunteers himself to do all the work at his uncle's house, and I love when he finally has enough and just breaks his uncle's record player. Like, I've said before, but when SpongeBob gets mad, it's usually funny, and this moment is no exception. I love all that Uncle Captain Blue does for SpongeBob is just to make him even more scared than he already is, as this was a great and hilarious way to build tension. The fact that BlackJack just lives right next door is hilarious. SpongeBob's increasingly dramatic daydreams are a true highlight of this episode too, but in general, the humor in this episode is top notch, and y'all know I love seeing SpongeBob freak out over stuff. SpongeBob breaks into BlackJack's house to save his parents, only to learn that there was nothing to be afraid of after all. They're fine, just setting up for a party for BlackJack's release from prison. This releases all of the tension that has been building up and straining on poor SpongeBob. It also releases the tension for us, too. But I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I've just been laughing this whole time, so maybe not too much tension. But anyway, I like that the explanation for all the events of the episode makes perfect sense, and isn't all that far-fetched. I don't mind the bizarre in SpongeBob SquarePants at all, but I think this episode works better when SpongeBob's interpretation of events is unrealistic compared to the real deal. And then we get the final reveal that there truly was nothing to be afraid of for SpongeBob because BlackJack is the little man, and BlackJack is at most a litterer. That is, unless this episode functions as a critique of the United States prison industrial complex, which does nothing to rehabilitate prisoners, but actually traumatizes, abuses, and makes them more likely to reoffend, all in the name of profit and modern-day slavery. Hey, I'm getting my soapbox moment in there somehow. And this is a subject that I feel passionately about, so I hope nobody's expecting an apology from me. BlackJack is a really enjoyable episode, especially upon rewatch. It's really funny with some great writing to boot, and that's often all an episode needs to have that wow factor needed to be in my highest tier, unless there's some big problem. And this episode does not have that, so that's why I'm putting BlackJack in my amazing tier, where it comes in with a score of 9.3 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this review with some closing thoughts of mine. I can't believe this is the last trio of episodes, for real this time. I really liked this little experiment from Season 5. I'd love if future seasons brought this back. I know they've been experimenting with other episode lengths like 16-minute and 15-minute, or 18 and 14, so maybe there's hope? Oh, also another trend in this direction I adore is sister episodes connecting to each other, like Krusty Concessionaires and Dream Hoppers or Swamp Mates and One Trick Sponge. I'm not sure if Season 14 has done any of this, but all I can say is give me more and give me them now. There are other closing thoughts I could say, but I also don't think I can get into them. The prison aspect of BlackJack has made me think of a lot of things, a lot of recent events, but as I write this script, those things are raw and difficult, and I have so many opinions, but I can't word them right. I also can't do it in a video about SpongeBob SquarePants. I don't know. I wonder how many of y'all even know what I'm talking about. I hate capital punishment with my entire being. The state should never have that power. And that's all I'll say on that. To be frank, I'm tired and wrung out. Not of these reviews, but of this week in general. And so that's why I suppose I'll just end this review right here before I get even more upset, and I'll see y'all next time.